jake.live. Download our free app and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, The Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, The Jake Feinberg Show. And we can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And without further ado, I want to bring back a friend of the program, a guy who continues to inspire along the way. Even as the music changes, he tries to remain the same and as authentic as possible. Randy Brecker, an honor to welcome you back to The Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, thanks, Jake. Great to be back.
What's new with you? What have you been up to these days? What kind of gigs have you been playing?
Oh, well, a lot of different kind of things as usual. Pretty not too related, but let's see. Last couple of days I was out in Minneapolis at a Crooners Jazz and Supper Club with a really nice trio. It was a lot of fun. And next week I'm going to a very nice fundraiser for blood cancers, featuring a lot of wonderful trumpet players, some classical, some jazzers, including Doc Severinsen and Arturo and Al Vizzuti, Marvin Stamm, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And previous to that, Monday night I'm at the Blue Note with the NYU Big Band Jazz Ensemble with my wife, Ada Rovati. And last weekend we were out at Princeton High School for a wonderful high school jazz festival. Heard some amazing young musicians, I must say. So a lot of different things, all unrelated and unconnected, but a lot of fun nonetheless.
You know, I was going to ask you about if you could just talk a little bit to the audience, about how you originally coped with your brother's loss, and ultimately, in retrospect, how it made you stronger as a human being and a musician.
Well, that's one I'd have to give some thought to. You know, he had been sick. The only way I could really cope with it, I think, at the time, was the fact that he had been so sick for so long. People say this, it was kind of a blessing because he was in such distress, pain, and had fought so valiantly for so long. In a way, I suppose, I don't know if I should use this word, it was kind of a relief because there was not much hope on the horizon. I think that's why I could deal with it. You know, if it was a sudden thing, I think it probably would have been much harder. But we knew it was coming. I remember I was playing a concert in somewhere in Tennessee, and I heard from my sister that he was really not doing well, and it sounded like the end was imminent. So I kind of thought about him through the whole concert and on the whole way home. By the time I got home, he had passed already.
Wow.
So, and it didn't make it easier, you know. Then that was you deal with a whole new level of grief, and I don't know. I guess in the ensuing years, I've just tried to do what I thought he would have wanted me to do musically and spiritually, and as a husband and father, because he was measured so high on all those fronts.
What could you talk specifically about what you thought he would like you to do?
Well, just remain true to the music. I mean, one of the things I wanted to do, and we did that, was I wrote some music, all kind of with him in mind and with our relationship, and that came out as the Brecker Brothers Band reunion, where I dedicated a tune specifically to him and other members of the band that had passed on, because there's been way too many throughout the years. We just weren't lucky in that department. 7 or 8 guys of various bands have passed on. So that was one thing that his surmise inspired, I think, because I hadn't written a lot of music in a long time, so it was nice to put that together and just kind of dedicate the whole thing to Mike and other departed Brecker Brothers Band members.
If there's one thing that that made your brother a transcendent musical figure, and speaking to a worldwide audience about it, people that might have been born, in this century, what was his what was his legacy to melodic invention?
Well, he just was so serious and he worked so hard at his music. Of course, his main inspiration was John Coltrane, and I think he continued that tradition where he just practiced hours and hours every day and was never satisfied with his own playing and kept adding to his vocabulary. Like, usually when you get a little older, you tend to slow down a little, and he didn't. And late in life, he got interested, for instance, and this is just a for instance because he was interested in a lot of different things. He got interested in Bulgarian folk music and got deeply into that, studied with local Bulgarian musicians and started to write, and really, and once again, kind of reinvented the way he played the saxophone. We're still in the process of putting some sequences, finishing stuff that he had in his computer, and hopefully someday it'll see the light of day, because it was completely different than anything he had done before, really that anybody had ever done before.
I mean,
and that's just one example.
Did you Bulgarian folk? I mean, was this like Jewish gypsy folk music? I mean,
well, kind of like wedding music. There's a tradition of Eastern Europe music that features incredible technique, and there's a lot of woodwind music entrenched in the music, particularly in Bulgarian folk music, wedding bands, virtuosic stuff, and I think that caught his ear. There was I'm trying to think of the name, it's escaping me now, as usual with my brain, Farmer's Market.
Yeah, right.
That originally caught his ear, and then just some local musicians, I guess, that played around, some of whom didn't have music as a full occupation. I remember he was tracing down guys in New York. Some were cab drivers, and he would search them out and take lessons. And these sequences are amazing. I just recently listened to them. I can't release them to the public yet because we're still trying to figure out how to finish this stuff, but it's completely unique, completely original. It's Michael Brecker's impression of Bulgarian folk music. So it just shows you how serious of intent he was, and it never left him, even after he was sick. Of course, he did his last record when he was Pilgrimage, when he was really ill. To this day, I don't know how he did that, because I know how sick he was. So he was just an amazing guy.
Talking to Randy Brecker. Yeah. No, I mean, just a real question on that. We can put a button on this, but I've been doing this film documentary for almost a year now on Stan Getz, and Getz his family was a Russian Jewish gypsy family. They lived in the ghettos of the Bronx, and every day the Italian and Irish kids would come over and kick their ass every day. And and then ultimately he was on the road with Tea Garden in 9th grade. But I'm curious. I know you were younger than Stan, but was your father first generation immigrant to the States?
Yeah, his parents were the first generation, so he was second generation. But he came up with all those same kind of stories, being picked on, having garbage thrown at him at school. So it's a similar upbringing. And Stan was actually born in Philadelphia, as you know.
You're absolutely. I mean, I'm just wondering about the effect that it had on your brother as well, growing up. Like, basically, did you guys find more in common with other minorities? Because I mean, like Columbia, I think it was Columbia Avenue, had about 10 clubs on it. I think we were talking about this last time, but
yeah.
Do you feel like that helped co-join the Jewish and the African American population?
Yeah, I think it did, because we had similar. We had suffered similar indignities, let's say, and had both experienced prejudice. Although we grew up, my parents dealt with it by moving to a Jewish neighborhood where we grew up, which was Cheltenham, Elkins Park, Melrose Park, which the school was predominantly Jewish, although there was a pretty good Christian people in the school, but we took the Jewish thing a little more lighthearted than people did today. I remember there was always and this was a derogatory word. We'd have a baseball game, the Jews against the Jewish shkut. I think that's how you pronounce it, which was a derogatory word, but everyone made light of discrimination where we grew up, which was nice. We had a baseball game every year that the Jews usually lost, I think.
No, but I mean, this is so important because, what was that, a Yiddish word, shkuk? I've never heard that word before.
Shkut, yeah, I know. It just is some kind of derogatory term for non-Jewish people, but it was said with love. You know, it wasn't.
No, because
I mean, we had a lot of fun with that kind of stuff in our school with everyone. Everyone was pretty close, but it was a predominantly Jewish neighborhood.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I mean, Cal Jader's band in the early '70s. Dick Burke was over 300 pounds. John Hurd had a stuttering problem. Mike Wolf had Tourette's syndrome, and Cal Jader was an alcoholic. I mean, do you think? I mean, I guess the reality is, you said you poked fun. You poked fun at each other's ethnicity. I mean,
yeah, we did for the most part, and there was every once in a while somebody was serious about it, calling somebody a damn Jew or something. But that was really the minority. We were very lucky where we grew up that all ethnicities got along, and I might mention it was the home of Reggie Jackson, Cheltenham High School.
Reggie Jackson was from Philly? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he was a year younger than me, and he was a great baseball player, as we all know. But we knew him as the quarterback of the football team, and he was an amazing football player. He actually got a football scholarship, and that's why we thought he was going to the majors. The next thing you know, he appears as a baseball player. So it was a pretty incredible place.
Well, unbelievable. Well, listen, I mean, your spirit and the soul of the Brecker brothers and whatnot continues to reign supreme on this program. We have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I want you to take a listen to this, and then the story that ensues, and then hopefully you can help fill in some of the gaps. Okay?
Okay, thanks.
So, Jim Strasberg, he was my first real teacher. I mean, the first guy that I saw that I was like, wow, what is happening here? You know, and he had studied with Jim Chapin and cats in New York, and Sonny Igoe, you know, Tommy Igoe's dad. And so anyway, Jim Strasberg, you know, said he couldn't make this gig. Do you want to do it? And I said, yeah. So I did it for a couple of weeks. And on the band, as I said, were the Brecker brothers, and Barry Rogers, great trombone player.
Oh my God, he was the Jew. He was a Jew from the Bronx.
From the Bronx, yeah, and he really slightly crossed over.
He was the first salsa trombone player. Yeah, no, Bones Malone told me
There you go, right.
Unbelievable.
Right, so the band was amazing, and it had a Latin piano player, I can't remember his name, he played bass. So they couldn't find a bass player, so, and Birdsong played piano and sang. And so this Latin piano player, maybe I'll think of his name in a minute, but anyway, he had the Latin concept of playing funk. It was a funk band. And the Latin concept of playing bass, you know, is like very orchestrated. Like, here's the line, you know, play that for the first 150 bars. You know, so it was like,
the clave.
You know, that's the deal, right? It's like the clave. So he's like playing something like bum bum, bum bum, bum bum, bum bum. You know, with tons of space, you know, for the drums. You know, it was like, wow, this was like heaven. You know. So we did that gig, and then we did a recording. The other important part of this thing is that Pee Wee Ellis was on the gig. He subbed once in a while, and I got to meet Pee Wee.
This is on the. No, we're still. This is still the Birdsong gig. Pee Wee was subbing on.
Still the Birdsong.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah.
He had just left James Brown, you know, because he felt James was kind of ripping him off in terms of publishing. He had written, you know, he had written Cold Sweat with James Brown, and he had written, you know, I'm Black and I'm Proud, and There Was a Time, and several, you know, pretty big hits, in fact. And but he had, you know, problems with James's business. You know, I guess everybody kind of knows about that. But So he had left, and so he was in New York, looking for gigs and doing stuff, and so I met him. And then we established a friendship, and we used to play just duo, and that was when the jazz, of course, he was a real jazzer, still is, And so I really kind of opened up jazz-wise with him. At any rate, Birdsong went in the studio, and so we all went in the studio. I think it was the Columbia. I've never heard this record. I don't know what happened to it. It's one of those.
He goes on and on and on. Do you have any idea who that is?
Hello?
Yeah.
No, I didn't recognize the voice, but I recognize a lot of the circumstance.
Yeah, the voice is the great drummer Jim Payne. And
Jim Payne. I haven't seen him in a long time.
Well, we got to all I'm saying is this: the Edwin Birdsong, and I'm like, how did Brecker connect with Bird? I mean, I want to know about this gig and who was the Latin piano player, because what Jim was saying was that you guys went into the studio, cut an album, and he's never seen the light of day. But I think it did come out. Because I was like, well, I'm going to talk to Randy and see maybe he can shed some light on it.
Gee, man, I wish I could. And I remember a couple of those gigs in New York. But other than that, I think I met Birdsong through Mike and Barry. My recollection was that also Billy Cobham did some of were on the gig. So I would imagine that in 1969, when Horace Silver broke up the band, Billy Cobham and I came back to New York with no gig, and Mike had, in the interim of us being away, had come to New York and met Barry Rogers, and somehow they had met Birdsong, and they drew us into the band. Maybe Billy couldn't make some of the gigs, but we did several gigs, and it was a lot of fun because we could jam up some of the horn parts. Birdsong had written some stuff out, some stuff that we really internalized, that we used our impression of that stuff for years to come. But I don't quite remember who the piano player was. My recollection was, for the most part, Birdsong might have played piano. And then he got involved with Roy Ayers and produced and co-produced a lot of his records. So he let his own band kind of fall by the wayside when they had a lot of success with the Roy Ayers records. He was behind most of them.
Wow, this is revealing, because what Payne was saying was at a certain point when you guys were in the studio, Birdsong came in and said, "Hey, I got a buddy here who wants to play a couple tracks on the drums. He's gonna sit in." So Jim Payne stepped aside, and then who walked into the studio but Clyde Stubblefield.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, this is. I mean, again, we're talking to a cat who's been on thousands. I mean, how many hundreds of is it hundreds of thousands of sessions at this point? I mean, is it really?
Oh, well, gee, I don't think hundreds of thousands, but definitely thousands. So it all kinds to run together. But I surely remember Birdsong was. I could even say he was influential on all of us, because he came out of the James Brown tradition. He had great songs, great horn parts. It was really open. It wasn't stuffed with a lot of technology. He just had a keyboard, and there was a lot of space to lend our talents to. And I remember Billy Cobham was very excited about the band. In fact, he asked me, I do remember this. He said, "So, what are we going to do if the band really hits?" I mean, he was really into it.
I love it. No, and I also this is what sparked my interest, because I also believe that you mentioned to me in set one of our interview that you and Fred Wesley had been able to collaborate, and then Pee Wee at that point had broken up, had left James Brown. But was that around the same time that you and Fred Wesley started to collaborate?
Well, I suppose so. I don't know if I could call it really a collaboration yet, but I was on his one of his first recording endeavors as a jazz trombonist, which some of it got released. I have heard a couple tracks somewhere of that record on Facebook, or it was directed in Fred's book. directed you to a website. I forget, but it's on one of his records. He has a recent release. I forget the name of it, but some things from that very first recording session, I think Faddis was on it too, are part of this his latest release, which is a compilation of his life's work. I forget what the title is.
What is it called? Funk for your ass or something?
Something like that. I'd have to look for it.
So
but
there's original and the original sessions were from '73 or what year do you think?
No, probably even earlier. I think, man.
Wow.
Probably early '70s, but definitely early '70s, maybe even late '60s, where I had no idea who he was. I knew the contractor's name was Emil Charlap, who got me the gig. And I didn't know Fred, but he wrote in a jazz context really well. There was no funk on this, and I forget who else was playing, but it was really well done. It was Slide Hampton. If I was to try to categorize it, I'd say he was at that point influenced by Slide, and the writing was really first-rate jazz writing, nothing to do with funk. And I probably didn't meet Pee Wee till later somewhere through Mike or through Liebman. They had an association. And we did sessions together, but it's all like thrown into a big, a ball of confusion. There was so much happening at that time.
Do you look back on that time? I mean, you were living it up and loving it, but are there any similarities? I mean, I just talked to Alan Schwartzberg last week, and he and Bob Mann, who's been evading me at all costs, they have this great studio. Or they did have this great studio in Midtown, and they sold it because it's like
right,
deep diner.
Yeah.
It's like what's the point of what? I mean, Alan's like it's a cut and paste time now, and I just and I want you to paint the picture of the similar because I'm in my own little bubble, but I mean, can you overlap the similarities between this mishmash? I mean, I'm looking at it here. I see this Randy Brecker album, 34th North Lexington, but that's not the one.
30.
But that's not the one we're talking about because this one also has Fred Wesley on it.
Yeah, I call that's actually they miss. The real title was 34th and apostrophe Lex, which is where I used to live, 34th and Lex, but they left out the apostrophe, so it looks like 34th North Lex. When they printed the record.
My question is, how can you talk about the similarities? What is still vibrant? What's still? And I was transcribing this interview with the Trinidadian bass player David Williams, and he said, they want to make you think that the music is dying, and he was talking about jazz. He's like, but it will never die. It will never die, and new musicians will always come in. And I love that upbeat response, and I love the fact that he's traveling the world. But I want you to talk to me too. I mean, you just talked about this smorgasbord of gigs you have, but is there can you find similarities between the vibrancy of that Birdsong Fred Wesley Brecker Brothers time in 2017? And if so, talk about it.
Well, you can find the vibrancy in the fact that jazz education has done such a great job, I think, and even though there's all the debatable things about whether they churn out original musicians, all I can say is in a general sense that there are many, many young people that love jazz and can play it better than we could have imagined. I mean, let me just mention this high school band, for instance. We heard a bunch of high school and middle school bands last week when we were in Princeton, and all the bands from Princeton High School. That's number one. Always has a first-rate jazz program. They always win the state championships. It's all very competitive. In fact, they've just gotten back and won again. Number one, and I knew they were great. But when I was growing up, the best school in Pennsylvania was Pennsbury, and they happened to be there too. I didn't get a chance to meet the band director, but they played the SHIT out of a tune called "March of the Tadpoles" by
I can look it up. I can look it up.
By Toshiko. Akiyoshi.
Oh, sure, right on.
My old friend. I go way back with her and Lou Tabak, and I had never actually heard that tune before, but you can Google it. It's really hard to play, and they played it faster than it's ever been recorded. It was incredible, high school kids, because it's really a hard tune. All this is based on All the Things You Are. And if you close your eyes, you'd never believe it was a high school. And just not a special high school, just, a high school from Pennsbury that self-contained with students from the area. So in that respect, with the youth movement, jazz and music is in I think, a really fine state. What separates it from the earlier days are the fact that it's harder to sell this stuff as you get to be a professional. You don't make money from record sales, or because the things don't sell like they used to, and you just get very little the way things are set up from all the streaming sites and all the download sites and YouTube and et cetera, et cetera. So that's what the big difference is. There was a lot of work, daily work, so we were free to experiment and have fun with music and really just think of it as fun because we were making a living in a way doing something else by playing on sessions.
Well, there's one session here I got queued up. I want you to listen to this. It's not going to be hard for you to get it, but it really brings it. I put it on a lot of mornings for my daughters as they're getting ready for school. Let's take a listen to it, and we'll come back.
Okay.
You got?
Wow. Well, I haven't heard that in a long time, but that's probably from One Man Dog.
You're darn right it is.
And was that me playing piccolo trumpet? That's pretty good.
It is. And
it sounds like it. And a weird thing, the one thing you could hear definitely through the phone, even though it was distorted, is just Barry Rogers' amazing trombone sound. It's unmistakable. And also unusual that Mike played soprano because he didn't like to play it. But that was a lot of fun. And I might have mentioned it last time, but James, we contributed some of the arrangements, but he actually arranged a lot of it, but not in a traditional sense. He brought in the arrangements on graph paper, and each horizontal line was a half step, and each vertical line was a half step. Each horizontal line was a 16th note rhythm. Think of that for a while. We had to try to figure out our parts. We ended up, taking everything home and just writing out, but we had to transcribe our parts from graph paper. And James meticulously wrote this stuff out the only way he knew how, by devising a completely unique way to pen his thoughts to paper.
Wow. I was wondering when your relationship traced back to if you connected with him originally when he was playing with the Flying Machine with Danny Korchmar. When you guys...
Well, that was Barry's connection. He knew all those guys, and he brought Mike and I into the fold through knowing James and Cooch. How they met, you'd probably have to ask Danny. But somehow they had a connection really early on in James's career.
Yeah, it's really cool. Could you... So, if I'm reading that correctly, those sessions were done all live, all together in the studio?
Oh, that I don't remember. It could be, if not live, next to live. He tried to do things as live as possible, but I would imagine, I just don't remember. I should, I guess, but I just remember him bringing in the parts. My memory was it was in New York, and we did several gigs with him in New York at Radio City, for instance, where we rehearsed for a week, and he had all the original guys, flew in from California then, and we played 2 or 3 nights at Radio City and a couple other cities. That I remember, but I can't quite remember if the session was live. I suspect it was kind of halfway live, because it took some time to figure out the horn parts since they were on graph paper.
I got another name that voice, and I want you to listen to this, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Okay, let me see if I can figure this one out.
You'll be all right.
These different situations, and it was a great time to be in New York because I got to play with a lot of different people who were, I always thought were much better than me. I did a record date with Gatto Barbieri, And I got called to do that, and I walked in the studio, and there was Roy Haynes, Airto Moriera, Stanley Clark, you know.
What a great eye-opening thing right there.
Almost had a heart attack, you know. I mean, I thought, I'm going to play with these guys, you know. I mean, I'm just a kid from Boston, you know. I mean, what am I doing here, you know?
No,
but that was the situation that in those days, in the early 70s, there were a lot of records being made, a lot of different kinds of records, and there weren't so many guitar players that could jump into the fray and play these different types, more experimental or fusion-y kind of things, but still had a good understanding, of jazz. Because the jazz players wouldn't touch that stuff. I mean, you know, you wouldn't find Wes Montgomery playing with a fuzz tone.
Yeah, that's so in my fantasy. That's what at the both ends in San Francisco. I was like, you know, I bet he was playing with a wah pedal. But you're right; those guys were jazzers through and through. I just think.
Oh no, that stuff didn't really happen until the late '60s, and that's when I was leaving Johnny Hammond and kind of getting involved. And I also was working sometimes with a band in Boston, which is pretty unknown, called the Stark Reality, which was led by a vibist named Monty Stark, who passed away about 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And it was a quartet with electric guitar, electric vibes that had a fuzz tone on it.
I love this stuff. I love this. Is right in the
way. It was really weird, and electric bass and drums. And so that was my first foray into the sort of fusion world. And then later I met Mike and Randy Brecker when I was working at this little club in Boston, just playing. I don't know what I was doing. I was probably playing behind a singer or maybe playing some incidental music, and I happened to use my wah-wah pedal and my fuzz tone for, you know, just fooling around. And they were next door at the other club, another club playing with Horace Silver, playing straight-ahead jazz. And so we met each other on our breaks. You know, they would come in and they heard me play, and they said, "We like the way you play." And my name is Mike, my name's Randy, and we started to hang out. And then they got in touch with me when they went back to New York. They called me about trying to come down and play with this band Dreams. And that's when I went sort of full bore into the fusion world. I mean, I eventually, you know, was playing with them pretty much full time.
Well, no, I wanted. First of all, there was another cat. All right, what do you got for us, brother?
Well, it didn't quite sound like him at first. I thought it was maybe a young Al Di Meola, but he's from New Jersey, and then I put two and two together and got the whole story. So, of course, that's John Abercrombie, Crumbles, as he's fondly known. And, yeah, it's pretty accurate. We loved him. Well, when he played in the rock style, he thought using a wah-wah would help, so he was never without his wah-wah. And that's what got me into using a wah-wah. It was slightly before Miles started using it. Abercrombie couldn't show up to a rehearsal one day, but he left his stuff there. So there was his wah-wah sitting empty on the floor, and we had hookups ourselves to things made by Hammond called condors that had the same jack. So I plugged the wah-wah in between my horn and the condor, and it sounded just great on the trumpet. So I started using it and used it for years, and Miles would come down and hear Dreams, us wah-wah-laden trumpet player and guitar player, and next thing you know, he was using it. And
Miles was coming to Miles was. See, this is what I wanted to talk about: is what has happened to the how many white cats were trying to be like Miles? I mean, you did it. You broke through, but I mean, how many cats were trying to do what he was doing?
Well, I imagine a lot of us. You know, he was so influential and so just on the scene. You know, part of his doctrine, I think, was to really go out and hear bands and get ideas, which is how he kept current and how he heard young musicians. So unlike a lot of jazz musicians that you wouldn't see, you'd always see Miles at all the clubs. He wasn't one you would go up and talk to, you know, but you just look at him from afar. But, yeah, he came down to hear Dreams at the Village Gate when all this was happening, when Abercrombie was in the band, and I had started using my wah-wah. He never came up and talked to us, but you always knew he was in the club because the word spread like wildfire. Miles is here, Miles is here, Miles is here. You could just hear it going through the crowd. And years later, I might have told you this before, but I never really met him. Years later, we had the club. and I found myself, was crowded night, and I found myself just standing next to him, and I figured, I might as well try this. There he had his sunglasses on, his bug-eye sunglasses. I held out my hand and said, "Hey, I'm Randy Brecker. I own the club and a trumpet player. I've been a big fan," or something to that effect for many years. And he just stared back at me and didn't say a word. Just stared back, silence. And I kind of slunked away and went to the bar and started drowning my sorrows in double vodkas. And I swear this is true, about 2 hours later, we had met upstairs, and
Right.
the bar was downstairs. I heard a little puff of air on my left ear, and I hear, "I love my wah-wah, you love your wah-wah." And he looked at me and split.
I love it, dude. And you were cogent enough to remember that.
Oh, well, you wouldn't forget that.
That's unbelievable. That is such a that's so classic. I was going to say, I mean, Abercrombie. There was a line from the interview where I was talking to him about this period of time, this Dreams period, where, and I'm not going to do justice to it from a theory point of view, but he said it was just basically, it was like almost like a rock jam. It was like a Cream
Right.
kind of jam where you were playing really over one chord, but the way that you guys were, that you had this jazz background, is that you were able to play these. Again, I'm musically, but I mean, can you talk about what it is about that time, why it is that so much stuff has been sampled from that time, and why the groove is so deep? Because it seems to me that you cats had, from the dance bands, from the salsa gigs, from just being able to play bebop and post-bop, you were able to make that rock music swing a little bit. That's the music I love, and I just wanted you to talk about your interpretation of, even though it maybe seems simple, that Cream, Hendrix kind of stuff, how you guys put the jazz aesthetic to it to make it really groove.
Well, we were, jazz musicians at heart, and plus we had the great Billy Cobham at the drums, who started that whole style of fusion, of playing drums, and I was with him previously for a couple of years with Horace Silver, so I saw him starting to listen to, Horace was his first gig out of the Army, I think, and he started listening to Cream and Ginger Baker and Purdy and all the rock or funk drummers of the time, James Brown. I saw that development started bulking up and adding drums. And in the interim, once again, Mike moved to town, met Barry Rogers, who had in turn met two singer-songwriters, Jeff Kent, Doug Luban. And the answer is their tunes just lent themselves to improvisation. Like Abercrombie said, they weren't that complicated. Some were only not really one chord, but maybe two or three chords, and jazz oriented, even though they didn't know it. They just lent themselves to improvisation. So when they were looking for a horn section, they were actually looking for a trumpet player. They had found Mike and Barry. They were looking for a drummer and a trumpet player, and we came to town holding our tails between our legs because Horace had broken up the band. And we said, well, we just came back to town. We don't have a gig anymore, so how about us? And that was the birth of Dreams. And a little later, we decided to add a guitar. We thought we needed that at least because we were only a sextet, so we added Abercrombie and his wah-wah. And we just jammed up music every day. And the fact was that Billy swung his butt off, and the tunes lent themselves to us being able to jam on top of it. And having Barry in the band with his extensive Latin horn section background also was very important. And Mike's and I's deep connection to ourselves, we had a similar kind of the way we attacked the little nuances with vibrato and little grace notes, and it just all fit together like a glove. It was an unusual band. Most of the other horn bands were tightly arranged and featured jazz horn sections that came from jazz backgrounds, but there was nothing quite the Dreams band because it was so open and there was so much improvisation involved.
The name of the, for the record, the name of the Fred Wesley album is Fred Wesley, the Lost Album, and
Okay. Great.
Kenny Asher on electric piano, Michael Brecker, Randy Brecker, Charlie Brown, Ron Carter, Bob Cranshaw,
Wow.
Eddie Daniels. Yeah, this is about it, and John Faddis on trumpet.
Right, I remember Faddis on the one tune.
Yeah, well,
So that was early on. It might have been because Faddis came to town a little later. Or it was probably really early 70s.
Yeah, I'll have to get a date on that. We got one more tune here for you.
Okay.
Curious if you can peg this one. We'll marinate on it for a minute. Hold on.
You might have got me on that one. I couldn't even tell if he was speaking English, but that's kind of a take on Sneaking Up Behind You. Sneaking up behind you. And it's definitely got some Brecker Brothers licks in it, whether it's us or not. I don't remember.
Oh, no. I found this, a tattered copy of this album, like, right after we did part one. And I don't know about your brother, but you are playing trumpet on it. And this is a session from the year I was born, 1978.
Wow.
The name of the leader is a guy named Rasa, Rasa, and then the name of the album is Everything You See Is Me. Okay, and he was channeling Hare Krishna. He was singing about Hare Krishna on that. Now, I'm sure so this was 78, so you get that Michael Jackson kind of feel to it, a little almost pre-Michael Jackson feel with some great horn lines. But I'm curious about. I talked to a lot of the cats, guys like David Kemper, LA studio musicians. You listen to Christian rock from the early 70s, Second Chapter acts, some the Andre Crouch, some of those cats. It was non-denominational as far as bringing in musicians. You didn't have to be Christian to do a Christian album, but by the late 70s, the litmus test came in where Barry McGuire, cats that were doing this stuff, they said, listen, you're not part of the you're not part of the tribe, so you can't be part of the music. And as far as I'm concerned, it really hurt, religious, whatever you want to say, Christian music. And I was curious if you ever found yourself in a gospel setting. I mean, this guy was obviously doing Hare Krishna. He was riffing on Hare Krishna, but I was curious about, as Jewish, if you found yourself in another setting, a religious musical setting.
Well, not really. I did do some Jewish dates, wedding kind of. Jewish music for wedding kind of dates where you would just play until your chops fell off. There was one guy, I forget his name, that did all the sessions, and somehow I got some. But generally, and I vaguely remember this was a Facebook, somebody asking me about that record, I think. It's a similar thing, and I have a feeling it wasn't me on trumpet. They listed me, but I don't think it was even me, but that's the thing you just played. But they definitely stole some Brecker Brothers licks. I probably would have remembered that because it's so close. Not only the horn stuff, but it's the thing is kind of a rip-off of Sneaking Up Behind You or a tune. So, but generally, there wasn't much prejudice in the studio scene either with as far as hiring guys because they were white or black. We all got along pretty well. And like I said, the only kind of religious music I occasionally did was a Jewish record date that was retained in my memory because we literally played until we couldn't play anymore. They tried to squeeze as much stuff in as they could. And me and the other trumpet player was a really good guy that too did a lot of that kind of work. Said, "Well, we got to stop now. We're done."
I'm going to need to mail you this record so you can vet it.
Okay.
Because I would love to further explore that, and I'll be back with my family in June. If you have any gigs, just let's stay in touch because I would love to come.
Okay.
I'd love to come catch up with you and check out your gigs if you're playing around that time.
Okay, great. Well, June, most of the time I'll be in Japan with Tropez and Steve Gadd, Lou Marini. So we did it last year, and July I'll be in Europe with Stern. But let's see if something comes in the U.S. and hopefully we'll get together. It'd be great to meet face to face.
Oh, I'd love to meet you, and then come to Arizona, man. Get a gig down here.
Yeah, well, there's talk of us being out with Stern in December to Tucson. Brian Bromberg has put something together.
Oh, well then we're going to blow it out. We'll blow it out at that time.
Okay,
right.
So that looks like it's happening. It's sometime in middle December, and if not before, we'll definitely see each other then.
Love always, Brecker. All right, and safe.
Okay, well, thanks. Doing a great job there, Jake. I enjoy all the Facebook posts too.
Right on.
You
dude.
got it. You're the man.
Later on, bro.
Okay.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And we'll be right back with Brian Godshaw on the Jake Feinberg Show right after this.